Hey everyone, how you doing? This is Amon Green, Green Bay Packers all-time leading rusher, and you're watching Packers Total Access Live, your daily source for Packer content. Go Pack, go!
What's up, guys? Welcome into Packers Total Access. My name is Clayton. You can check us out on packernet.com. Find me on Twitter at Packers_access. I just want to give you guys a quick episode here in the late morning here in Eastern Standard Time. I guess it's still morning on Lombardi's time, also known as God's time up there in the great Midwest. And we're going to talk a little Stephen A. Smith reaction to the Micah Parsons trade. You guys know Stephen A. Smith, really, really good friends with Jerry Jones. And of course, Stephen A. Smith, also a self-proclaimed, I think he's backed it up pretty well, cowboy hater. So you're probably going to get an opinion that's a little bit biased in that regard. He loves poking fans or poking fun at Cowboys fans. However, I think he makes a lot of sense. He was a lot calmer in this reaction to the Micah Parsons trade than I expected him to be. So we'll get that. We'll give you a little bit of insight, a couple statistics on how this pass rush may improve for the Green Bay Packers. And and just kind of give you, like I said, Stephen A. Smith's take. But before we do, if you guys would do that YouTube stuff for me, hit like, hit subscribe. If this is your first time tuning into PTA, welcome. Thank you for making us part of your morning. Listen, we're not experts here. We're not insiders. We're not media members. We're fans just like you, talking Packers on the daily, doing pregame shows, postgame shows, in-depth analysis. We're doing film breakdown. If you guys tuned in last night, you obviously seen the Micah Parsons Chalk Talk, where we broke down his top plays of 2024 to kind of give Packer fans a little preview on what they're getting here more recently from Micah Parsons. That was a real fun watch there. So if you guys haven't seen that, you can go back. I'll try to link it to the backside of this video so you can find it very, very easily. So if you're looking for that type of content, click subscribe. Make sure you also hit that bell icon so you're notified every time we go live here on PTA. So let's get to it. The man of the hour, Stephen A. Smith, the absolute master of trolling Cowboy fans. Listen, I've got the volume cranked all the way up on this, so you may have to turn your televisions up just a little bit, and hopefully you can hear it okay. This was Stephen A. Smith on First Take, reacting to the Cowboys trading Micah Parsons to the Green Bay Packers. All I did in the tweet was I said, Stephen A. Smith raking Jerry Jones over the coals for the Micah Parsons trade. How do Cowboy fans hear 99% of the trade coverage saying they got fleeced, but are still somehow convinced they won this trade? So let's go ahead and play the audio. I'll probably pause in between and kind of give my take on what he's got to say here. Here we go.
Are you surprised this happened?
He also heard me face to face telling him I don't believe him, not for 1 second. And certainly that ended up being the case, because this is what it is. This is a disaster for Jerry Jones. This is a bad, bad situation. And I think this is something that's going to taint whatever legacy he hoped to have, because this is not a football decision. He can slice it any way he wants to. Micah Parsons is a superstar caliber player in the National Football League. You traded him for 2 late first-round picks. That's late. The Green Bay Packers haven't had a top 10 pick since 2009. Mm-hmm. They're usually in contention. This is going to be a low first-round pick. You made them younger. You made them better defensively. Okay, so you take those things into consideration, and they're within the NFC conference. You know what? If you're going to trade Micah Parsons, trade him out of the conference, or trade him to somebody like New Orleans or somebody like that. You don't trade him to a Green Bay Packers team, who, by the way, is the last team to whip your ass in the playoffs. When you win the playoffs, the people that bust your tail was the Green Bay Packers. And so the reason why this is kind of something, Cam and Dio, that's going to taint Jerry Jones is because in the end, we're all looking at it and we know this is not purely a football decision. 2 first-round picks and Kenny Clark, a defensive tackle who had a down year last year, does not equate to a superstar at age 26 that is Micah Parsons. By the way, Clark is 3 years older. It doesn't equate to that. If you had made this deal in March and opened the floodgates to everybody, then there's no question that you would have had a better deal offered to you than the deal that you just agreed to. Last year with
let me pause there a second. What he said about Kenny, I think, is very, very true. Okay, listen, Kenny Clark, we've been very vocal. Kenny's a great person, a great leader in the locker room. I feel like the Packers, that was a great draft pick. That was money well spent up till the last contract extension. And the reason I disagree with the contract extension, I had already started doing started doing the show here, the podcast on the daily, when we signed him to that extension, I was like, man, it kind of seems like he's on the decline. I always give credit to Ryan Schlip, Pack Daddy over at Packernet Podcast, where you can find this show in podcast form. I always give him credit because he's the one who pointed it out the first time I heard on his podcast. I'm like, really? Has Kenny been playing that bad? And you go and look at it and you really dive into the tape a touch, and it matches up with what the PFF grades were showing, what the run stop ratio was showing. Like, man, Kenny has not played as well as he did under Mike Pettin as the defensive coordinator, right? And so this lasted through Joe Barry, and then last year, of course, he had the foot injury. You take all those things into consideration. You go, okay, his best football is behind him. I know he's turning 30 this year, and some would say, Clayton, you can play till you're 32, 33. That may be the case, but Kenny came in the league, if I remember correctly, he had just turned 20 years old. So, it's easy to just look at the age and say, oh, yeah, he's still good. He's still got a few years left. But you really got to look at the mileage, right? You got to look at the mileage that are on the tires there, on the tread. When you look at Kenny Clark, he's a 10-year vet essentially, right? So, some people, they see 30 and they think you got a few years left. That's because you came in the league when you were 23. So you've only got 7 years of wear on that. So it's not the dog Kenny. I think Kenny was a good player. I think at his peak, he was a great player, but he hasn't been a great player for the last 4 to 6 years. So with that being said, when you go to deal Kenny from the Packers perspective, it makes all the sense in the world. You want to get rid of a player 1 year too early rather than 1 year too late. The cap hit jumped tremendously next year. So I didn't see any scenario where Kenny was going to be back on the roster unless he agreed to take a pay cut next year. So you kind of offload that, you absorb the cap penalty that accelerates to this year, and now you wipe the books clean next year of Kenny Clark's contract as Micah Parsons' contract starts to inflate a little bit, although it's still, his cap number still under $20 million next year. So it's a nice little trade-off, in my opinion. And I understand you look at Kenny in the middle, okay, who's going to play defensive tackle? They like what Carl Brooks has shown. He had another great preseason. I think that's who they're going to try at 1 tech with Devontae Wyatt at 3 tech. So that kind of makes sense. Hey, let's see what we got in Carl Brooks. You also got an option to potentially kick LVN inside from time to time if you want to try Devontae Wyatt at 1 tech in your nickel 4-2-5 and go that route as well. So it's just a lot of different things that come into factor here when it comes to Kenny Clark being a part of this package. And it makes a lot of sense. It really does. And you know what? That bolsters Jerry Jones's, interest in the trade. Say, all right, we can get us a run stop and defensive tackle here, right? So I think that's something that kind of set the trade over the edge. However, when you look at it from the Packers' perspective, boy, 2 firsts and a guy you're getting rid of next year anyway for a top 3, definitely a top 5 pass rusher in the league. I mean, that's a heck of a deal. And that's why, when you hear people like myself, like Tim, other folks, other Packer fans that are like, there's no way I'm giving up 3 firsts and Rashawn Gary for Micah Parsons. Well, how about 2 firsts and Kenny Clark? I didn't look at Kenny Clark as extra compensation. I looked at Kenny Clark like, whoa, you can actually make this deal go through, make it more appealing to the Cowboys, and you put yourself in a position where you can offload that contract and you are getting some kind of compensation in return. Because I don't think many teams would have traded much for Kenny Clark next year, being 30 years old and coming off one of his worst years, right? So anyway, let's continue here with Stephen A. Smith talking about the trade.
CeeDee Lamb, when you waited till August to sign him, you cost yourself like $64 million. $64 million in space that you could have utilized to get additional talent on the squad. So you wait.
Perfect example. When we're talking about modeling rosters, when we say modeling rosters, we're talking about planning out the next 3 to 5 years of your roster. Last year, when these 3 contracts came on the radar for the Cowboys, Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb, and Micah Parsons. If you listen to the show, I said I would do it in this order. If you think Dak is the guy, Dak goes first, then Micah Parsons. And I wouldn't even think about extending CeeDee Lamb until you get yourself in Super Bowl contention, right? And what I mean by that is wide receiver is the last piece you put in place. Bill Walsh 101, he always said wide receiver is the last piece you put in place for a championship. So Jerry, if you look back, he kind of did it backwards, right? I mean, I think he signed Dak first, then he did CD's contract before trying Micah Parsons. He should have went Micah Parsons. That way, imagine if you're in this scenario for the Cowboys and you end up extending Micah Parsons, you've got Dak Prescott, whether you guys in the chat or me or anyone else agrees or disagrees whether he's the quarterback of the future, your organization, your scouting department's got to make a determination. Is Dak Prescott the guy, right? If that's the case, then you now have quarterback, tier 1 position of importance on offense, edge defender, Micah Parsons, tier 1 position of importance. Those are locked in as cornerstones for your franchise moving forward. And then you make a decision on, why don't we deal CeeDee Lamb and get draft picks? That would have been the better play. And what's crazy, and I think Stephen A. Smith talks about it here as well, they trade for George Pickens. So they didn't just go backwards. They doubled down on it and actually sent draft compensation for another wide receiver, right? Which tells me maybe they truly thought the Super Bowl window was open, and then they realized, oh, we really screwed the pooch here. What's really wild, and we'll see if Steven mentions it in this clip or if it was another one, guess who is the agent of George Pickens? It's David Mulligetta. Literally the agent that Jerry Jones said David Mulligetta just told him to take that contract and stick it up his ass. So he traded for a player who's got the same agent at Micah Parsons, and then literally 6 months, 12 months, however long ago the trade was, he pisses off that agent. You think that George Pickens is going, oh boy, is this where I'm going to be? My agent absolutely hates Jerry Jones. It's just an absolute cluster, absolute cluster. Here we go.
Waiting and waiting and waiting. That's not new to us. That's bad, but it's not new to us. What's new to us is that this was clearly not for football reasons. This was because you thought you had a handshake agreement with a young man that was basically pleading with you, talk to my representation, and you ignored him. And by the way, it's the same agent you're going to have to deal with when it comes to George Pickens if you want to re-sign him, assuming he plays lights out and he's somebody you want to keep on your roster because he's got the same agent as Micah Parsons. All of these things that you take into consideration for Jerry Jones to make this move, I mean, for me personally, don't bother me. This is going to give me more stuff to laugh about. But on this particular morning, I don't like to see Jerry put himself in this kind of position. It looks very, very bad. This is not a good day for the Dallas Cowboys.
And again, you could tell that Stephen A. Smith was kind of coming from a direction of he wasn't like trying to pile on Jerry there. You could tell they got kind of this friendship, right? Jerry's been very vocal about that. And although Stephen A. Smith is constantly, and I mean constantly, trolling Jerry Jones, you could tell there's a mutual respect there, right? So it almost sounded painful for Stephen A. Smith to have to say what he just said, and the fact that, man, Jerry really, really screwed this up. Let's go to the chat real quick. Guacamole, that's some good-looking table-side guac there, by the way. Parsons actually had a better run defense score than Kenny last year. I'm pretty sure that's positive. That's a fact. That's true. I want to say that he graded out in the 60s and Kenny was in the 50s. Now, here's the thing you got to be careful with there. My favorite bowl of guacamole is you got to look in terms of deployment, right? What was Kenny asked to do on the Packers roster? And it was kind of odd to us because I expected him to play more 3-tech, right? And have him in more pass rushing situations. He played a whole lot of 1-tech, both in our base, mostly in our nickel 4-2-5. And when you noticed on the tape, he was doing what we refer to here as a touch spy. You're in the A gap in between the guard and the center. Ball snap, you engage with both the guard and the center, and you're not rushing the quarterback. You may get a little push and try to sell them on the fact you're rushing, but your eyes are in the backfield watching the running back. You're really controlling 2 gaps out of a 4-3 front or a 4-3 roster build, right? So it's somewhat of a hybrid front where everybody else is 1 gap, but you're in a 2 gap. And I was watching that going, well, that's why Kenny isn't getting any pressure. He's not truly rushing the quarterback. What are they doing, right? And then you find out at the end of the season, you guys remember I questioned this all year going, that's a touch spy. So I guess they're looking at Kenny like they're going to double team him anyway, throw him in the 1-tech. You get a +1 hat count by occupying 2 blockers on 1 defender, and you're taking away scrambling / rushing lanes for both the running back and these mobile quarterbacks. Then we find out at the end of the year what happened. Kenny had a busted up foot, right? A broken foot or whatever it was he played with all year. So I love the move there that with 97 in the lineup, you know the offensive line is going to go, hey, that's that guy. When he's on. He can be a game wrecker too. Let's make sure we take him away from the interior pass rush. And they were just feeding right into that. Well, that's gone this year, right? However, many people like to say that Micah Parsons is bad at run defense. I've been very vocal. It's not his superpower. But make no bones about it, he's not bad at run defense. And it's one of the reasons why I was so hesitant when people were saying trade Rashawn Gary and picks for him. If you traded Rashawn Gary, you're removing your best run defending defensive lineman, right? And you're adding a player whose strength is pass rush, but definitely not run defense. It's not his strength. That's not what he does the best. So you would basically reduce your run defense and improve your pass rush. Well, to me, we're going right back to the old days of the 49ers running all down our throat in the playoffs, right? So all those things come into factor. All those things, they matter. They really, really do. And again, if you're worried about the run defense now that Kenny's gone, remember what I just said. Guys, Carl Brooks can do what Kenny did last year. Carl Brooks can hold the point of attack in the one tech, which, by the way, he played a lot of nose when they brung him in. Now, when they were in a 4-3 base, whether it was an under or an over with a jam front, they would definitely put TJ Slayton in there. Don't get me wrong. But if you're in your nickel 4-2-5, 70 to 75% of your defensive snaps, and you put Carl Brooks in that one tech and let him basically rush the A gap, whether it's on the left or the right, he's going to occupy the same double team that Kenny did. And if they fan out, I have a lot of faith in Carl Brooks to be able to win one-on-one, whether it's with the center or a guard in the pass rush. So I'm not concerned about that. I'm not overly concerned about the run defense, but I think it is a great point, Guac, that hopefully you don't mind me calling you Guac. I think it's a great point that you've got to acknowledge Micah Parsons had a better run defense grade than Kenny did last year. But you got to take into consideration all the different details. And again, that touch spot played a big role in that. So let's take a look at this graphic. We hit it last night. I want to touch on it again real briefly here. A pressure rate on first and second down, i.e. not pass rush down since 2021. All those media members that continue to hate on Gary, they now use it like, well, see, we traded for Micah Parsons because Gary sucked. Could not be further from the truth. One of the things they said last year, which I scoffed at, was a stat got dropped that Rashawn Gary was one of the most effective pass rushers on third downs. And the media members rolled their eyes and said, well, of course, that's when it's a passing situation. Of course, you're going to be better there. Not even taking into consideration that you're comparing apples to apples across the entire league. Well, look at this statistic right here. Pressure rate on first and second down. So their whole argument that Gary was really bad on first and second down was a myth. Nobody took the time to look up the stats, but here they are. Look at the pressure percentage on first and second downs. Micah Parsons led the league at 15.3%. Second is Trey Hendrickson, 11%. Myles Garrett, 10%. Nick Bosa, 10%. Max Crosby, 10%. Jadeveon Clowney, 10%. Von Miller, 10%. Greg Rousseau, 10%. Aiden Hutchinson, 10%. Leonard Floyd, Khalil Mack, both at 9%, along with Zadarius Smith and Andrew Van Ginkel. And look who's next on the list. 9.7% tied with Andrew Van Ginkel in pressure rate on first and second downs. I wish I'd have looked this up last year when they were running victory laps saying that Gary was a bad football player on first and second down against the pass rush. Because, guys, the reality is he is, what is that, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 13, probably about 14th in the league. Go look at his cap hit comparison last year compared to every other edge defender in the league and tell me if that's not good value on first and second down, even removing one of his strengths of rushing the quarterback on third down. Also, him leading all edge defenders in run stop ratio last year as well. So you couple the best first and second down pass rusher in the entire league at 15% in Micah Parsons with roughly the 14th or 15th best in Rashawn Gary, who's also the best run stopper. Things are about to get good. And again, I'm going to say this every time. This doesn't mean it's a slam dunk. Packers, we're going to play a Dan Orlovsky audio here in just a second. I disagree with Dan on this take, and I'm going to explain why afterwards. But I'm simply saying you were set up front to be very effective, and injuries are going to happen. If one of these two guys go down with an injury for 3 to 5 weeks, whatever, just, throw a random number out there. Micah goes down. You still feel good about where we're at because we proved last year you're second in yards per carry allowed, i.e. run defense. You're second in the league in that, and you were 8th in sacks last year. So if one of these guys go down, it's not the end of the world. It's kind of like having Malik Willis as your backup quarterback. If Jordan Love gets banged up and has to miss a little bit of time, well, guess what? You know Malik Willis can win you ball games. Micah Parsons and LVN can get the job done if Gary misses, significant time. Gary and LVN can get the job done if Micah Parsons misses some time. And that's why I think they're going to look at this pass rush from a rotational standpoint and be like, you know what? We can still do a heavy rotation because that's going to keep Micah healthy. That's going to keep Gary healthy. LVN's a young whippersnapper. Put him out there and just turn him loose. Kick him inside from time to time and let him continue to refine his game, because many people tried to paint this picture that LVN was so bad. You look at the second half of the season, he was flirting with 15% pressure rate. He was really, really stepping into his own, playing with a broken thumb where he couldn't use his hands either, and they had to kind of lock him down on one side and not take advantage of some of the mismatches, if you will. So I thought that was a pretty cool graphic there. Let's go to this Dan Orlovsky clip real quick. I was going to save it for later, but we'll go ahead and put it up. You know what? How fitting. Let's throw a little LVN shot up here. So this is Dan Orlovsky on Get Up, okay? And he was talking about the Micah Parsons trade as well. Let's hit it now. I want to get everybody's take in the chat on this as well. Here we go.
So there's been so much conversation here, Dan, about the Cowboys and being willing to part with him and all the rest of that. That's the soap opera. Now let's get to on the field. You have Jordan Love. You have this receiving core. They drafted the rookie in the first round.
They should be in the NFC Championship game.
Could you expand on that thought?
This team should go to the NFC Championship game at worst. They should win the division. They should be the division favorites, and they're the team that now is most equipped to beat the Philadelphia Eagles. They have the best edge rush duo in the NFC now. When you take Micah Parsons,
the best edge rush duo in the entire NFC, says Dan Orlovsky,
who is one of the 6 or 7 game wreckers, and you pair him with a player like Rashawn Gary, who is a fantastic edge rusher.
You got a graphic on the screen right now, by the way, that says ESPN Analytics best chances to win the NFC. The Eagles at 20%, Lions at 14%. The Packers, Niners, Commanders, and Rams are all at 9%. So you tied for third as it sits right now, although FanDuel actually has the Packers as favorites to win the North now.
Problem for offenses. And then you add in Edgerrin Cooper, who's their young linebacker, who's a superstar. The flaw of this team in Green Bay were their corners. The best way to help corners is get to the quarterback quicker. And so we're talking about a defense now that is loaded, that was getting under Jeff Hafley, their defense coordinator, better as the season went on, and an offense that has got a ton of weapons. And I would say this, Matt LaFleur, if I was Matt LaFleur, I would go into Jordan Love today and be like, we are going to be the most aggressive offense in the NFL. Because if you give the ball away, we'll get it back. You are so talented that we are just going to be ultra aggressive. And now this team is absolutely loaded with the.
That's where I disagree with Dan, and I'm going to explain why. This is what's wrong with the sports media. And listen, Dan Orlovsky's forgot more about football than I'll ever know, right? And people like to make fun of him for being a backup quarterback that ran out of the back of the end zone. I got you. That's all fun. But I don't want to sit here and pretend like I know football better than Dan Orlovsky. However, if you go into this year with the mindset of, okay, we just picked up one player, right, in Micah Parsons, and he's a great player. Now we can be careless with the football and offense. You are going to be really, really disappointed with the outcome at the end of the year. There's no doubt in my mind. You've got to win the turnover differential. That was the thing that held us back last year. We showed out of the 5 losses within the division, the NFC North, I think it was 3 to 4 of those 5 losses were decided because of a horrible interception or a fumble, i.e. not protecting the freaking football. So now you think you can just go in and be, and just be careless with the football. That's absolutely crazy. Now, if you're talking about calculated risk, like, hey, on this drive here, we now have a little bit better defense with one player. And I love what Nick said here. One player isn't going to automatically get you or make you get to the NFC Championship game. Could not agree more, Nick. I think that's a solid point, man. But if it means you can take an extra shot or two, if that's what Dan's saying, and he didn't specify after that comment, right? If it means, all right, you know what? We feel really good about our defense. Let's go out on first down this drive and just have a shot play called, which means max protect, couple guys going deep, throw a little play action in, get the safety in the box, make them go single high with the safety in the box to protect against the run, play action fake to Josh Jacobs, and go over the top to whichever guy has the best leverage. I can kind of understand that, but to think that you can just now be careless with the football is absolutely insane to me. So that's one thing I would say I disagree with Dan on. The other stuff I definitely agreed on. So that's, like I said, just kind of a little bit of I don't know, a little bit of an update on what the media is saying. I still haven't found anybody in the media that thought the Cowboys came out better than the Packers in this trade, which is really, really mind-boggling to me, because when you looked at Jerry potentially making this trade, the reason I didn't think it was going to happen, because I thought you were going to have to sell the farm to get him. And the fact that you were able to do it for 2 firsts and a player you're getting rid of anyway, unbelievable, man. So really like the way that's lined up here. Chase in the chat, good to see you, buddy. He says, hey, Clayton, would you line Parsons up in a 7-tech or over the tackle directly? The answer is yes, Chase. You want to move Parsons around. You want to, and that's going to come in terms of deployment for Micah Parsons this year. It's going to depend on what team you're facing, what's their injury concerns at the time. Are they missing a tackle on one side, what have you? Schematically, do they like to run weak side or strong side? All those things are going to come into play. Do they like to go outside? They like to run stretch plays, outside plays, or do they like to run between the tackles, as what we call a downhill? All that comes into play on how you're going to line him up. And I think there's going to be times you see him in a 7. There's going to be times you see him in a 5. There's going to be times you might see him in a 4-eye. And there's damn sure going to be times where he's playing joker, standing up over the center. I think you'll see a little bit of that in some of our dime sets, and you can get really creative there. I think there's also a chance that in our nickel 4-2-5 occasionally, if LVN has taken the step like he seemed to shown in preseason and in camp, if that's the case, there's going to be times that you want to pull Quay Walker out of the nickel 4-2-5, put Micah Parsons and Edgerrin Cooper with a double barrel A-gap mug, right? That double A mug where they're going to be lined up in the A-gap. And then you've got your defensive tackles in a double 4-eye, your edges in a wide 9 with LVN and Gary. And boy, oh boy, where's the rush coming from? You could potentially drop LVN into coverage and fire everybody off the other side. Let him quick little jab step, get back to his curl flat, or his curl flat or his hook curl, and he's got the wingspan to bat those passes down. Now all of a sudden you've gained +1 in the hat count because the tackle was planning on blocking him. Everything fans right, and you've got a huge mismatch. Imagine Edgerrin Cooper and Micah Parsons occasionally, not every play, running some kind of twist in the middle, right? Like that twist fire out of the inside linebacker position. There's a lot of things you can do, man. It's going to be very, very interesting. So to answer your question, Chase, I think they're going to line him up in a lot of different places. I think he's mostly going to play edge, which will consist of a 5, 7, and 9 tech the majority of the time. But there's going to be times they kick him inside and they make him play joker and stand up in that A-gap. So it's going to be really, really interesting to see how they end up using it. But I want to hear from everybody in the comments. Let me know what you think about what Stephen A. Smith said, about what Dan Orlovsky said, and any of the comments that I've had here. Let me know your take in the comments. We're going to be going live tonight at 6:30 p.m. Central Time for PTA Live. If you guys have never tuned into that, make sure you subscribe. Make sure you click the bell icon so you're notified every time we go live. And that's our daily show for the most part. We do that show every single day. It's just a bunch of Packer fans in here talking Packers and breaking it down. Guys, we are officially stepping into Lions Week. So we're going to go ahead and take an early preview look and also cover any news that may drop between now and then. That's going to pertain to not just the Packers, but the NFL, and more specifically Packers versus Lions. We're going to give you a PFF preview and kind of show you an illustration of what the lineups look like over top of each other. It's going to be a lot of fun. So you guys make sure you hit that like, subscribe, and click that bell icon so you're notified when we go live. Appreciate everybody tuning in. Let us know in the comments what you think about what Stephen A. Smith had to say. As always, let's go out and be the change we want to see in the world. And go Packers.
Here we go.
We're out. Bye, guys.